On page 159 in the Big Book, it states, "It became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life." Welcome to the Big Book Study podcast for anyone and everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. We are a step study which meets each week on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. Our group has one primary purpose: to carry this message to those who still suffer. It has been our experience that working the steps consistently provides us with a better, saner life. The Big Book of AA is our textbook. Time and experience have proven it to be the most successful approach to the steps. You can find our meetings at our website at primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. Today, we are studying Step 1, the problem, Part 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become manageable. What is meant by the Step 1 phrase, powerless over alcohol?
Hi, this is Heather, and I'm from Saskatchewan, Canada. So number 1 says, what must those who have suffered alcoholic torture believe? And that's from the doctor's opinion. And the answer is the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. And when we look at this question and this answer, when we initially come into these rooms of recovery, we may think that our problem is our metaphorical drink. But what we don't understand is that we have a disease. We are not weak. We do not lack in willpower. We can't quit whatever our metaphorical drink is because our mind, first of all, tells us one thing. It tells us that if I take this drink, it will be all right, when another part of our mind tells us that it won't. But the part of our mind that tells us it's going to be okay overrules the logical part of our mind. So what we have to understand is that my thinking is abnormal in the fact that once I start, I can't stop, and that my body starts to react to that choice of whatever I take and whatever reaction it creates in my body, whether it's a shot of cortisol or dopamine or whatever. My body is craving a feeling of ease and comfort. And so what we have to understand then is that it's not just a mind or not just a body problem. It is both. And with that, I will pass.
Okay, let's move on, if no one else has any comments, to the second question.
Hi, I'm Kathleen from Colorado, and in our study, the second question, for the alcoholic, drinking triggers the manifestation of what? And that's on page XXVIII in the doctor's opinion. And the answer is an allergy. Or for those of us that are not alcoholic, but more have behavioral addictions, such as sex addiction or food addiction or codependency or the different gambling addiction, these behaviors, we have what we call an abnormal response. So the allergy is much like a somebody that's allergic to a food or penicillin or something like that. So once it is ingested in the body, there is this reaction, and it can't there's nothing that can be done about it. It's not about doing less of it or doing it in a different form. It's really about, once it's there, the body is having this allergic reaction. And in many cases, though, you can even die from eating peanuts or whatever, if that's your allergy. And so for the alcoholic, that allergy comes into play with the drink. And for those of us that have behavioral addictions, we have this abnormal response, and we have these consequences. And our body also has this reaction, as was mentioned a little bit ago about adrenaline and different chemicals in the body begin to cause this reaction that we have. So just to reiterate, it's an abnormal body or an allergy, and the body reaction as well as the mind.
Thanks, Kathleen. My name is Dave. I just wanted to add that the important part of understanding this idea of allergy in relation to addiction is that if a person is allergic to anything, they cannot control the response they have when they're exposed to that thing. So what the Dr. Silkworth is saying is that we have an allergy, in the alcoholic's case, to alcohol, whatever the addiction happens to be. So you can see how a gambling addict, has an allergy to the chemical reaction they have in their body when they get the excitement, perhaps, about whether they're going to win or lose in their gambling. Same thing with any addiction. We have lost the ability to choose what the reaction is, just as much as someone with an example of asthma can't choose if they're going to wheeze if they're exposed to something they're allergic to. These are benign things, maybe cats or peanuts or house dust or pollen. For us, when we're exposed to something that we are addicted to, we have lost the ability to choose our reaction. And so this is the physical part of the disease of addiction. And it's not a moral problem. It's not a problem of weak will. It's not a problem of bad decisioning. The asthmatic can't decide not to wheeze, and the addict can't decide what their reaction is going to be with regard to alcohol in the alcoholic's case. And with that, I'll pass.
Hi, this is Tina from Idaho and Oregon. And my comment about this question is that this abnormal response, it's harder to see it for things like codependency. So I'm just going to give an example of what that might look like. So let's say that I am in a relationship with a sex addict, for example, and I find myself, I'm starting. I will start looking to get approval and get love and get attention and be number one. And I pay ultra close attention to the other person, to facial expressions, to if they're making eye contact, if they're paying attention to a book or a TV show instead of me. Or if somebody else is paying attention to them, I might become jealous. I then make up stories about what's going on. And then possibly I work myself up into such a panic that I might start driving, stalking them, following them in my car, those kinds of things. And it's driven by this abnormal response. It's like I cannot control this urge to manage or to get loved or to get liked or to get attention or to be number one. And I do more than I mean to do. I I neglect my work, I neglect my children, and that is definitely an abnormal response, even though the person hasn't ingested anything. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment on that one?
I'm Dave. I'm going to do number 3. Does the phenomenon of craving happen before or after an alcoholic or any other addict has succumbed to the desire again? The answer found on page Roman numeral 29 in the doctor's opinion is after. The phenomenon of craving happens after the addict has succumbed to the desire again. So here's the problem with the disease of addiction. We not only can't control the reaction we have to that which we're addicted to, we've established that point, the doctor established that point, but we also have a craving for the very thing that we can't control our reaction to. So you can see quickly how this becomes not only difficult, but there's an element of insanity to it. I'm going to give a non-addictive example again, just using the asthmatic for a second. If an asthmatic was allergic to cats and they couldn't control their response when they were exposed to cats, if then they had a craving to be with cats and they just couldn't stop, and they were telling their doctors and their nurses, but I just can't stop with cats, I think the doctors and the nurses would probably look at them and say, that's crazy. You are insane. You will have to stop seeing cats if you're going to live with this disease of asthma. But this is the very identical thing that we have with the disease of addiction. We crave the very thing that we can't control our response to, and we've gotten to a point where we've proven to ourselves we're not sure we can live with. We can't live without it, whatever it is. We crave it, but we can't live with it because it does so much damage to our lives, to the lives of people around us, and to our experience of living. So, once we get started with that desire, that want, that, I'm going to go after a few drinks, the phenomenon of craving kicks in. And we can all give an example. It was just talked about if it's codependence. Once we are starting to think, what, I want a little information, or I want a little bit of words from him or her telling me I'm number one, then the phenomenon of craving kicks in, and we cannot get enough, and will never, ever be able to get enough information, enough words, enough validation, enough approval. In the codependence case, and of course in the alcoholic's case, never enough alcohol. There's not enough alcohol in the River Jordan to satisfy the craving for alcohol for those who know that they have the disease of alcoholism.
Thanks, Dave. This is Kathleen, and what we can't, right after we can take, we can go get whatever it is, the drink, or try to get whatever it is that we are have now. We go try to get it, and as soon as we get it, that craving has been set up, so we can't get enough. And even when we do get some, like within 5 minutes later, we want more. And what we're doing is we can't get enough of what we really don't need. So what we really need is, we have a spiritual malady. We have a spiritual, we're not hooked up. What we really need is something where we're hooked up with this source, this higher power. And it's going to that will satisfy us. But this drink or this other thing, it will never satisfy us. It's a bottomless pit. We will never get enough. And but we think, this is part of the mind too. We think that if we get that thing, that it's all gonna be okay. We calm down, we're not irritable anymore, we're not afraid, or we feel better. We just feel better because we just got it. But the problem is we will always want more, to the point of destroying ourselves and other people and our lives, and everything, in some cases, everything about our lives. And that's where we're going to end up. And so we have to learn a new way to live. And the 12 steps is a program about getting us reliably hooked up to this higher power. And we do that by living in give. And first by working these steps, and then living in give, and living in a way that's hooked up to the higher power. And with that, I'll pass.
Okay, this is Tina from Idaho and Oregon again. Our next question is, once an alcoholic or a codependent starts drinking, or metaphorically drinking, and the abnormal response, the physical allergy kicks in, this craving that we've been talking about, what do they have little control over? And the answer on page 44 is the amount they take. And, for the situation with the alcoholic, the amount they drink. For the codependent, it could be the amount we do or think about it. So it could be the amount of, trying to manage or control or snoop or pry, or how much time it takes out of our day or our life. We're obsessed. We can't stop thinking about it. Is there anybody else who'd like to offer any comments on that?
This is Dave. Tina just said we can't stop thinking about it, which, prompts me to bring up that the main problem of an addict centers in the mind. We've been talking a lot about the abnormal reaction in the body. But we have lots of things that happen in our mind before we get to the first drink, before we get to the metaphorical first drink, before we take the first action. And, these things can be noticed in the form of obsessions and those kinds of things, but it might be that it just sort of spontaneously happens without any thought whatsoever. What this particular question says, once we get started, we have little control over how our reaction is. And, amount is more measurable, I suppose, in the case of number of drinks. But for an alcoholic, it doesn't matter that, you get the idea, well, how about if I just stop with 2? Or how about if I just stop with 3? Now, that's an insane idea for an alcoholic, that they can just moderate, that they can just have a few, that this time they won't actually get really drunk, or those kinds of things. Or I can moderate to just once per week, or I can moderate to only this kind of alcohol. Though that kind of thinking is insane thinking, and we do not have control over the kind of thinking and the amount of thinking that we do about that. And all of that takes place before we ever put the first glass to our lips, in the case of an alcoholic, and before we ever perhaps take the first action or speak the first words, in the case of codependence and other forms of addiction.
This is Kathleen again. And I think the other thing here is that the mind, once that craving kicks in, the mind just gets busy trying to figure out how we're going to get more of it. that the mind doesn't think, the mind's not able, to think, well, let's, only do this, or that felt good enough. The mind really is just focusing. So for the alcoholic, you're sitting at a dinner table with a party and there's bottles of wine, and, the people that aren't alcoholics, they just have a glass of wine. They don't think at all about whether or not they're going to have another one. They don't think, they're not even, they're satiated. And then for the alcoholic, it's like they're watching the bottle of wine to see how much is left in the bottle. They're wondering if anybody's going to go get another bottle, and they're not satiated. And so, and that happens for all addictions. Our mind just starts, once that craving kicks in and the body has got that response, the mind just works to try to find that the next bit that we're going to get, until one day we, either black out or wake up in such a state of misery. We can be 6 weeks down the road after doing all of these different things, and blowing up our lives in the meantime and hurting people. And then we might be like, oh my gosh. But then we'll just start all over again. So thanks.
Right. Number 5. This is Heather again from Saskatchewan, Canada. What illusion must the alcoholic give up? And that's on page 30 in the big book. The answer is the idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking. And my comments on this question are, what does it mean that we have to give up? We have to give up the idea that we are going to be able to drink or eat or whatever like other people. We are not going to be able to do that. And when we give up this illusion, that is step 1. Step 1 is when I acknowledge that I cannot control my addiction or enjoy it. Neither one. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Heather. Kathleen again here. And yeah, this is the great illusion, and it will take us in some cases to our deathbed. I mean, it's just like we watch other people do it, and we say things like, I just want to have a good time with my friends. I just want to, have a good time with my friends like my friends do. And we will try everything that it takes to try to be like others. So we might, supplement with, well, I'll take medication, or we'll supplement with something, some other way that's going to help us so that we can keep drinking, so that we can have these codependent behavior. We watch, maybe we watch family members, we watch friends, we watch other people, and we compare ourselves to these other people, and we want to be like them. And we don't understand, it's just like, how can I fix this in myself, so that I can do what other people are doing? And there's no fixing, because it's been said, it's like an allergy. So we end up, the only way to do this is another way of life. And we don't know that way of life. We have no idea what that way of life is. And we're going to have to do some action. And the founders of this book taught us how to do it, and it worked for them.
This is Tina in Idaho and Oregon. And my comment on this is that from the codependence perspective, this can look like that I am going to be able to please people. I'm going to be able to get their approval and also be the person that I'm meant to be, or be true to myself. That we're going to be able to manipulate things and people in a way that we're going to be able to control and enjoy our relationships. And we get clearer and clearer that if we are going to at some point become true to ourselves and being the person that we are meant to be, that we're going to have to give up that illusion that we're going to be able to control and enjoy other people's approval or reaction, or being pleased with us, or any of those things. That is not something that we can control. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. I'm Dave. I think often the thought that many addicts have is that the real problem is the obsession with the stuff itself, whether it's alcohol, sex, if it happens to be that, relationships, if it happens to be that, food, gambling, whatever it happens to be. That my real problem is I just can't stop thinking about or obsessing, or it's the stuff, or it's the substance, or it's the person. This book makes a completely different point, that the bigger problem even than that is the idea that we can moderate, is the idea that we can participate with this like a normal person would. Our obsession with that idea that on our own we can figure out a way to moderate and participate with this addiction like a normal person would. That, I believe the book says, has driven many an addict to the gates of insanity and even death. So we have to understand exactly what the problem is that we're working with here. If the problem was alcohol, the substance, it would actually, I think, be a lot simpler. Yes, alcohol is fatal. Yes, alcohol is cunning, baffling, powerful. But the real delusion, I'm going to call it, is that I can somehow find a way to continue drinking, and you can see all the other metaphors, continue participating in, and do it moderately, do it normally, do it in a healthy way. That delusion will take me into a fatal realm if I cling to it long enough. That'll pass.
Okay, so this is Kathleen, and the next question is, can folks with the physical allergy, the phenomenon of craving, ever expect to find treatment that will make them like other men? And this is the answer's on page 30, 31. And it's neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. So, the book is telling us that there is no treatment that's going to help us be like other people this way, or be able to handle it or manage it, or, continue their life and not be so obsessed, or, not, their money doesn't go down the drain, their health doesn't go down the drain. It's like we there's no treatment out there. Now we will try to find it. That's part of our process, is, in hitting a bottom, and actually getting to admitting the powerlessness in step one. We have to try. We have to keep trying until something in us is ready to say, no, this is not possible. I'm not like other people. And there isn't a treatment, but we will chase after, we will try, anything and everything. But the book is telling us there is no treatment.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Dave. There are two very famous figures who really originated this point. Both are doctors. The first is a well-known doctor by the name of William Silkworth. He wrote the preface to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He treated thousands of alcoholics in New York City back in the 1920s and 30s. And as a medical doctor, he pretty much first established the concept that we in the medical community do not have a course of treatment that will solve the problem of alcoholism. To my knowledge, here we are. This is going on 90 years later now, because that was the mid 1930s. Here we're approaching the 2020s, the mid 2020s, and that opinion has not been overturned. There's not a course of medicine, a course of pills, a course of therapeutics, a course of medical therapy that has been found to reliably change the course of the disease of addiction. The second doctor is Dr. Carl Jung, who perhaps is the most famous psychiatrist in world history, perhaps for sure the most famous psychiatrist in the past century. And he also, in a very clear statement, which he provided to the authors of the big book at the time it was published, said, there are cases where I cannot come up with any kind of course of therapy that will solve this problem of alcoholism, this problem of addiction. And that was not for lack of trying. He had tried it many, many, many times in many different ways. So we have perhaps the most experienced known doctor in that era and the most experienced known psychiatrist possibly in history validating the truth of this statement. Fortunately, there is a solution, but it is not a course of medical or psychiatric treatment. Pass. Okay, let's move on to our seventh and final question for this podcast. Given that the physical allergy or the abnormal response is triggered only after they drink, or in the case of a codependent, for example, blame, manipulate, control, or pry or fix or ask questions, and not before they drink, then what is the only relief that the book of Alcoholics Anonymous has to suggest for this particular symptom? On page 30 in the doctor's opinion, and that's Dr. Silkworth, the answer is the only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. Now, for the alcoholic, it isn't too difficult to define the word abstinence. Often alcoholics try to come up with some softer, easier definition of abstinence. So I can only drink on Fridays and Saturdays, or I can only drink beer, or I can only limit myself to one. And as we've already discussed, it becomes very clear to the alcoholic that doesn't work and it never will work. Entire abstinence is the word. I cannot touch alcohol in any way, shape, or form at all. Fairly well known in the program of AA. For other addictive programs, I think it's important when we work our program to get clear on our definition of abstinence. And abstinence can include, for both the alcoholic and all other addicts, not only physical but also mental, and to some degree, lack of spiritual. So if we are abstinent from any actions to keep ourselves spiritually fit, we quickly, the book will tell us before it's done, get in trouble. On the other hand, we have got to stay completely abstinent from the type of thinking, the type of obsessing, the type of ruminating, the type of going on and on in our minds before we get to the first drink, before we get to the first action. So there's a physical component and there's a mental component. The solution comes in a spiritual component, but the problem lies in both physical and mental. And we have to be abstinent in both areas. And with that, I'll pass.
This is Kathleen, and this abstinence piece, yeah, so it's basically telling us we can't do this at all. And and what we're learning and what we're going to continue to learn as we go forward through this podcast series, and for those of us that are in recovery, those of us that have recovered, we can't just stop. That we could talk about that, and that's what's being said here. We can talk about that's the only choice, is we can't do it. We can't step one toe into it. And but we're also we have to learn something new, because if we can't stop, right, we can't have any. And if we can't stop on our own because we have this craving that happens, and we have this mind that tells us we can do it like everybody else, we're going to have something else to turn to. And the whole program of AA teaches us how to do that. And it doesn't just teach us how to do it, but we have to do it. So it's a program of action. So it's these actions that we're taking instead of stepping one toe. And as was said, as Dave just mentioned, this piece about thinking, it starts with the thinking. So we can't be thinking about, we can't step into that obsession with our thinking. And we have all kinds of history of doing that. And we have all kinds of old ideas that prompt that. So we're going to have to go in there and clean all that out, which is the step work. And then we're going to have to live a different way.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Heather from Saskatchewan. I just wanted to add that, if you are struggling with any addiction right now, and after listening to this episode, you might be disheartened or discouraged, I want you to know that the good news is this book, the Big Book of AA, tells us how we can live a healthy and sane life, and that you are not alone. You will find people just like you and just like us in these programs. And I encourage you to reach out, and again, to check out our website that was mentioned at the beginning and ask for help. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Heather. This is Tina in Idaho and Oregon, and I just want to add to that, just to reiterate that this 12-step program does not make a moderate drinker or metaphorical drinker out of an alcoholic or codependent. And if we want relief, it has to be complete abstinence. And as was mentioned, if that feels hopeless to you, you can find help with those of us who have found the help that we needed through the 12 steps at primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. Please join us on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I just want to thank everyone for their input on our podcast. And very soon we will be doing part 2 of the problem, the mind part. And I would like everyone to unmute, and let's close now with the 7th step prayer together. And now the prayer. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here
to your bidding.
to your bidding.
Amen.